starting to rack up some numbers here and experience in the venue here. I'd like to thank Paula Gloria Barton for teching for me this evening, and I have been so busy this week. I've been remiss in digging up somebody to come on the show with me, so I'm by myself tonight. And so I have you for an hour. Bend your ear a little bit. If you want to call in and add to the conversation, it's 679-7777. And this is live, uncensored, original content TV at 56 Rock City Road, Woodstock, New York. And yeah, there's a couple of things that happened this week that were really interesting to me. And that's at the 2 town meetings ago, I was listening to Felicia from 104, Radio 104, comment at the town meeting during the public be heard session, part of the meeting, about contract the town of Woodstock has gone into with the urgent task force. And excuse me. Now I'm not exactly sure what urgent stands for. I know it's something to do with Ulster County and something to do with
Regional Gang Enforcement Narcotics.
All right, regional gang enforcement.
Narcotics, yeah. It used to be task, now it's team.
All right, narcotics team. So it's ostensibly a drug, illicit drug enforcement tool for the powers that be, for the police. And I haven't seen this agreement, and so therefore I really can't qualify it as to what it actually means to us as citizenry. Felicia mentioned that there were some interesting aspects to this agreement about search and seizure, and then subsequently asset and property forfeiture. And it would be really interesting for us, we the people, to know really what the impact of this agreement is in our county, and how it would be applied and to whom it's applied. And you know, my concern is how our law enforcement is functioning in regard to the real victims. And the real victims of the narcotics and illicit drug trade are the end users who end up dead. And this has been happening in many, many small towns. It's not a big town problem anymore. It's kind of gone across the board ever since we got ourselves involved with a war in Iran, not Iran, but Afghanistan, which is, you know, the world's leading producer of opium. Now, a little bit of the history about opium and wars and the control of populations, you know, can be thought of here, and that would be the opium wars with China that Great Britain had conducted in the 1800s, and the result of that was vast numbers of the Chinese population were debilitated with opium addiction, and this opened the door to a weakness in their population in dealing with the colonial ambitions of an empire, of the British Empire. So I wonder often, are we in a kind of a opium/heroin war where our youth in the United States, our young people, our young and bright minds get afflicted with recreational use of a very dangerous and addictive substance. Heroin is a byproduct. It's a byproduct of the morphine industry. The morphine industry was monopolized by France prior to World War I, and then through World War I and World War II, perhaps even after that. And in the production of morphine for pain control and pain removal, really, was very useful on the battlefront of the two great wars and other wars around the world, where it gave a great deal of relief to the mangled and maimed and injured soldiers. So the morphine, itself is, I imagine, addictive to some degree, but it's a very effective medicine, and it was very effective in really assisting the recovery and well-being of these injured soldiers through the last century now. But heroin is a byproduct of morphine production, and it has a very potent quality for those people whose predilection is opiates, which is another interesting study. The differences that different individuals have. Some people will have a kind of a predilection for cocaine. Other people will have a compatibility, if you will, or predilection to things like marijuana, which is benign on so many levels, and even a healer as a medicine. My belief is all these substances have their medical use, but when we get into synthesizing things and taking medicines out of their natural context and into a pharmaceutical context, it changes them. But that's not what I'm talking about tonight. I'm more interested in how we're being served by our law enforcement and what that means as civilians who are increasingly controlled by rules, regulations, and a real interesting phenomenon that I've heard termed victimless crimes. And when you have victimless crimes, what do you have? And to some degree, I kind of consider this, what we have is unconstitutional statutes. Because you have to have a harmed party in order to have jurisdiction. You have to have a crime that has a victim. Somebody has to be harmed. And in a big sense, our public hazard is law enforcement at a certain level. I'm not saying all of it, and I have to say, I thought about this a lot, is that, we're lucky to be in this small town in Woodstock. We're lucky that many of us actually know by a first name basis some of our officers that are regulars here, full-time officers. And, it's a little bit like Mayberry, if you want, in that sense. And there's a sense of pride and comfort in that sense of community with law enforcement. And then on the next layer, whether it's the county sheriff, and then the next layer over that would be the state police, is further and further removed from us in our community. So there's this a sense of almost like machinery. It's like a law enforcement machinery. It's less personal, or it isn't personal at all. Whereas, or at least in our local constabulary, we have capacity to know these officers as people. And on a few occasions, I've been, very fortunate to have the help of the Woodstock Police. So, just so you guys know, I appreciate you and the work you do. Actually, as a kind of a funny aside, I was walking to work from town to the movie theater. I got a bag of ice for our soda pop because we don't have a freezer at the movie theater. So, it's a little daily chore, and sometimes I like to walk. And I'm going past the police station, and I was admiring the new police cars that they got. And being the mechanic that I am, I happened to look at the tires, and the tires were tired-looking tires. And one of the officers was actually getting in or out of his squad car. And I said, "Boy, I give you nice cars, but do you think you can afford some new tires?" And we kind of had a laugh and a chuckle, but, that was my concern for his safety, because, if he's going to be driving faster, for an emergency or something, I would like to see him have safe tires. So, these are the kinds of things that maybe are the concerns of our town to allocate, a budget for, as maintenance of equipment, and so on that point, by extension, we have the equipment of our station here, which is our voice. This station here at WATV and Public Access is an important asset for you, the community, to be informed of what's happening in your community and be able to talk about it and share. And I personally like to look at the best in people. I like to look at the best in humanity. I like to look at the best that Woodstock has to offer as a community. And I have to say, I've been lucky. Woodstock has been recession-proof for me, in a way. I have a humble lifestyle, and I don't require a whole lot. But nonetheless, I came here 30 years ago, and I've always found employment here, and I found a very open-minded community. There's a lot of acceptance for the eccentric people that many of us are, the artists and musicians and poets and creative sorts, and there's a lot of acceptance for people who are different. Let's put it that way. So it's been an interesting time here, and like any small town, it has small town problems and issues. But getting back to what started this talk about our town is some of the things that have gone on here have affected me personally. And one of the things is this agreement with Urgent and asset and property forfeiture. I think as a community, y'all should start asking questions what this means to us, because without due process, without a proper conduct, it's very easy for the mission of protecting our community to creep across the line to taking advantage of our community. One of the things I was witness to that really alarmed me was how the reservoir police, the DEP police, the New York City DEP, have in recent years, probably at least 10 years, seem to have been empowered with a lot of the same duties that our local police have. And I see them, stopping people for traffic violations. And there was an altercation in the Kachina parking lot about 6 years ago that I witnessed, where it was a DEP police, even though there were Woodstock police, county sheriff, state police, DEP, as there was 5 cars, police cars there all together for this one 60-year-old woman who refused to get out of her car. She was screaming for help, you know. And I don't know what the context of her problem was and why she had pulled into the parking lot. I happened to be working there, painting the barn there, and saw this pretty up close and personal. But she only responded to one particular officer, and when she finally did get out of her car, I was alarmed to see her handcuffed and shackled, and then thrown into the back of a squad car. I can't remember which one because it was a while ago now. I think it was the DEP car, like cordwood. I mean, she was not a young woman, and she was boisterous and complaining, but I didn't see her as being violent in any way. She just really objected to being stopped. So that kind of thing you know, is disturbing to me. But more disturbing is a fellow TV producer, Steve Romine, was sharing about a friend of his who some weeks ago, or I'm not sure the timeline on this, but this is going on now, had come into some inheritance when he was really needing some infusion of cash. Work had been not happening for him, and he really needed something. He lost his home, an apartment, or whatever, and so he got $50,000. And Steve and other friends said, "Hey, get a mobile home. You know, get a little RV or something, and you know, put a roof over your head with some of that money." And so he did, and he got a really nice RV or mobile home for, you know, under $10,000. And not wanting to trust the banks, he put the rest in a safe and into his vehicle. And after some goodbyes and getting readies, off to California to use the remainder of his inheritance to put his daughter through acting school out there in L.A. And somewhere in the West, he got stopped for failing to make a change lane signal within 100 feet of making the change. And for this really minor infraction, they stop him. They bring the drug dogs out, and they, you know, sniff around. There's nothing to sniff around for, so that didn't, you know, give them any cause to bother him. And finally, they're poking around the side, and they find a locked door. And he said, "Well, it's locked." And so they demand that he open it, and whether he gave them permission or not is unclear. I don't remember how the story goes, but
No, he didn't.
he didn't. So they break into this hatchway that was locked to find a safe, and they demanded he open the safe, and I assume he didn't give them permission for that either. And so they broke into the safe, and they find his inheritance, the remainder of it, about $40,000. And so they impound the vehicle, and they took his money, and they haven't given it back. And now he has a legal battle with you know, no charges, just that.
Not signaling 100 yards.
Yeah, 100.
Signaled, not 100
He signaled, but not within 100 feet.
Yeah.
It's not 100 yards, 100 feet. This is, you know, pretty ridiculous. And apparently, you know, he's got a lawyer that's working with him out there to rectify the situation. And there are quite some violations to his rights. So that's the cautionary tale that you know, search, seizure, and forfeiture can happen in the blink of an eye. And that's not due process that I know of any. You know, that seems pretty egregious violation of our rights. Moving forward to a personal, you know, thing that happened to me is actually, you know, I'm in a libel civil case has been brought against me, a civil suit for a letter I wrote in defense of my partner, and her life has been really upended, and we have been. I kind of updated you through other shows in the past what's been going on and the nature of the fraud that's going on, and the latest sort of chapter of this is the assistant DA admitted to my partner's lawyer that there's no evidence, there's no physical evidence, that they hate the case, and that there was no admission of guilt of any kind in any of the interviews that my partner granted. So we were left with this impression that it's still being considered for either dismissal or trial. And
It can't be considered for dismissal unless there's a motion for dismissal.
well, yes. So that's the pressure that needs to be applied to the attorney who, upon hearing that there was no physical evidence, failed to demand it be dismissed. And so we have now a situation where apparently we find out through yet a third party that the trial is on. So there's a real failure in the system here, in the judicial machinery, to protect equally the citizenry, especially when they have insufficient cause really to carry forward, to move forward. And so that's kind of where we're standing now with that. More to come, more to discuss. What I'm trying to tie together here is that there's an awful lot of action every day, and for most of us, we're oblivious. We don't move through our lives worrying about the other guy, because we don't think about the other guy. We don't think about the people who are caught in the legal machinery or judicial machinery. We don't think about people's homes being foreclosed on. And there was a tremendous amount, and still going on. It's a kind of a racket. There's a thing called non-judicial foreclosure that's illegal, and this is going on in New York State. It's illegal in New York State. So unless you know what you're up against, you can't really defend yourself. And see, that's no excuse. So you have to learn how to defend yourself, and you have to know what's happening to you. And that's part of the distress that I'm seeing in my life, is that even when you have hired an attorney and action is happening without you being informed. It almost begs the question, well, then why even have an attorney if he's not going to inform you? How can we, as a community, get behind an agreement with yet another layer of law enforcement, in this case, urgent, when we don't know what the agreement is, when I have not seen any documentation what this contract between the town of Woodstock and Urgent is. I have no idea what it says. I have no idea the implications of it. But I do know that from what Felicia mentioned at the town meeting, that asset and property forfeiture is part of the program. And once this forfeiture has gone down, apparently the town is entitled to 10% of it. Again, I want to see the document. I'd like to see it. I want to know what's going on. Other issues regarding that is, and I read a letter and a statement to the town board last night, Tuesday. And the gist of my note was pretty much what I've been saying. You know, unless I see this document, this contract, I have to object to it, because I don't know how this is going to impact myself and my neighbors. And you know, where's the constitutionality of asset and property forfeiture when there hasn't been a trial? When there has to be due process in order to punish and disable somebody's home, disable somebody from their income or from their property or their assets. That there's some serious considerations there, and I don't know the full impact of that. So I'm just putting that out there to you. This is what's going on. But what I touched on was the heroin flooding our towns in here, Woodstock, in Ulster County, in the Hudson Valley, in Wisconsin, in Maine. You know, it really is an endemic or even pandemic problem. Who's bringing it in? Where's the supply line? Because, you know, coming after the end user, coming after a recreational user or an addict does not solve the problem. So that becomes, you know, another challenge to a community when, if you follow that trail, if you try to find out where it's coming from, you end up looking at some very scary monsters. You know, we hear about drug cartels, and we hear about gangs, and we hear about trafficking. Another big, you know, concern is human trafficking, and that's a whole nother ball game. But when we start talking about the drug trade, the thing about it is the two most profitable things on the planet are illegal drugs and pornography. And everything else, even the petroleum industry, manufacturing, all these other infrastructure kinds of industries, as big money as it is, and it's huge money, is still smaller than illegal drugs like heroin. Very, very profitable. See, whereas, you know, you might say that's almost inconceivable that it's that profitable, but when you think about, let's just talk about petroleum for a moment. You know, you have to drill for the stuff, and then once you have it, once you find it, then you have to move it. You have to transport it, and then you have to refine it, and then you have to package it, and then deliver it, and then before it becomes an end user product. And, you know, those of us who complain about, you know, $2.50 a gallon of gasoline, that's actually amazing that it's still, you know, relatively cheap. Even $4 a gallon is still relatively cheap for the kind of action that has to happen for that product to get to us. So yes, they make a tremendous amount of money, but when you're talking about this insular world of the manufacture of opium-related derived products, the legal stuff, the oxycodone and the morphine and stuff, that's profitable too, and that's big money. But when you get into the black market, then you're talking about vast sums of money, exactly because it is illegal, and in the case of heroin, highly addictive. I mean, opiates are addictive to begin with, but when you get into something that's a byproduct of the making of morphine, and its properties are less medicinal and more, shall we say, recreational, you're talking about something that has incredible repeat customer qualities because it's so addictive. And something's funny going on with that because now it's cheap. And in some ways, it's, from what I understand, I don't use this stuff and I don't buy, so I don't know what's going on out there. But as I understand it, it has gone. The price of heroin has gotten so relatively cheap that it's even cheaper than marijuana or I would imagine even good alcohol, even good booze. And since it's a black market item, it may be illegal, but it's not regulated. It's not like you go and get a prescription for it. It's not like you can, go to a liquor store and buy a bottle or something. It's a black market, underground, secretive, and scary business. So that's why I wonder, with all of the money being spent on drug interdiction and narcotic, law enforcement, where's the busts? Not for the end user, or even a low level, dealer. This has to get from Afghanistan. It has to get processed, and then it has to get onto our street. All right? So there's a whole chain of activity there. And homeowners, in small communities are not going to be the big fish. That's just my opinion. Now, there might be big fish using some homes here and there. That's another matter. But we have some serious questions to ask. I'm actually just talking about this subject. It makes me afraid because there is so much invested in this illicit trade. And the reason I'm harping on this is because even in my safe little world at the movie theater, the building adjacent to it, that used to be the little kindergarten for the church. I thought it was the parsonage, but apparently that was the house next door. And this was part of the building complex that our movie theater is in. 2 winters ago, a young man died who was living there from a heroin overdose. So, that bothers me that in my building complex, while I'm happily showing movies to somebody, a young man had died of an overdose. And I would only know this because so many police were hanging around for so many days. And I asked a few questions. That's how I found out. Apparently, a lot of young people have died in the past, say, 5 years. I know of at least 5. That's 1 a year that I know about. And, and I hear tell that there are others. Is this being reported in the media? You got a thought?
Yeah, George, after we left the town board meeting yesterday,
Yeah.
I didn't even realize John Jordan was there, one of our fellow, Woodstock TV board members.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he spoke about the issue, and Ken Panza, who was there for a presentation on zero carbon emission and, being green neutral and all of that, he told John that he wasn't even aware that there were any heroin deaths. And then John said that sometimes, for the sake of less embarrassment to the family and the county, that they reported as cardiac arrest. They put it down in the autopsy differently. But he said that peers of his son, there's been 5 of them in the last year. And so for Ken Panza to say he wasn't even aware of it, when you're talking about zero carbon emissions and people are suffering so much in the community, and here's a town that's supposed to be a town board that's supposed to protect the well-being, it made me really proud of our producers that they're stepping to the plate and taking a stand on it. If I had known he was there, I would have asked if we could have stayed longer, but I wasn't even aware he was in the room.
Wow.
He just quietly came down and he put it on the record.
Wow.
So there's more deaths than what are being reported. That's my point.
Well, one of the things that, I'm not an avid reader of newspapers, so I don't know if any of this is even being reported. Every death that I heard about was from grieving relatives. Whether I saw these people at Sunfrost when I'm having a carrot juice or something, or in the case of the fellow that died in the building next to mine, that was because I had direct conversation with the police when they were trying to figure out what had gone on there. So zero carbon emissions, yeah. I mean, that's a whole nother subject. I got 25 minutes here. I can actually address some of that. There's a lot of science that I follow. And some of that science is in direct contradiction to the popular science that we're being given about global warming and carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide, and this is from everything I've been able to study and look at, is not the boogeyman. Is carbon dioxide is a miracle gas, and that it hasn't all been a bad story in terms of our use of coal and in terms of use of our petroleum as a world civilization. And in the previous shows I've mentioned, had we not in the 1890s transitioned from whale oil to light our homes, lamp oil, to coal-fired electrical plants and petroleum-powered lighting with, say, kerosene lamps as opposed to whale oil, whole species have been saved. There's a few species of whales out there that probably weren't saved, that did go extinct because of whaling, but kind of in the nick of time, the transition to petroleum has saved the whales. Now, putting plastic in the oceans and making dead zones and stuff like that and being irresponsible with petroleum and petroleum derivatives as a world civilization, no, that's not acceptable. So I'm not an apologist for the misuse of an asset like that or as a resource. What I am saying is that we have a phenomenon, and David Icke, I like to credit David Icke for this, famous sportscaster and footballer and media personality, I guess alternative media personality, talks about how our control paradigm on the world for over to humans operates with a thing called problem, reaction, solution. So we have the designers of culture, all right, the designers, the powers that be, the elite, the Illuminati. There's all kinds of different ways of structuring this thought, but basically there are designers of culture who create a problem, all right? And in that creation of a problem, they get a reaction from the target population, which is, let's say, Columbine shooting, or the West Virginia, the Virginia Tech shooting, where you have it's always the same scenario. If you folks haven't noticed this, it's always the same profile of the lone gunman who was probably eating too much Prozac and then went off it, and then got access to guns and was picked on and bullied by other kids. And there's always sort of the same story. And then he goes and he shoots up the place and kills a bunch of people. And by gosh, we need gun control. And so then you have events like Columbine and Virginia Tech, or the movie theater. I think there was one in Florida, the discotheque in Florida actually, and there's a movie theater out west somewhere. Maybe it was California or Texas. I can't remember now. But there's so many of them. Take your choice. It's always the same scenario. And the outrage is always Sandy Hook, Connecticut. The outrage from the community is, we got to stop the flow of guns into the hands of these, crazy people. And so the impetus now is, well, the politicians have a solution to the outrage, which is gun control. And I'm always skeptical of gun control in the sense that, I'm a bit of a Jefferson fan in this point, and our founding fathers were pretty smart. They for the United States, they had struggled to get out from underneath the colonial demand for taxes and stranglehold, and in so doing, created a contract between we the people and the government of the United States, our governing apparatus. And it's by its design, it can only function lawfully with consent of the people, with consent of the governed. And really, since 1913 and maybe even before that, the consent of the governed really has been put in the back seat by corporate interests and powers that I don't really understand or can identify. And the end result is problem, reaction, solution. 9/11. I saw those buildings come down while working on a stone wall in New Haven, Connecticut. My stepson alerted me to, hey, a plane hit the World Trade Center. And I thought, a little biplane, a little Cessna or something. And he goes, no. Is it? Come look. So I go and I'm watching the TV, and sure enough, something big hit the World Trade Center, and then another plane comes into view, and so I had started watching the event live. At least we think it was live, because there's so many anomalies involved with this, and I know people who were at Ground Zero that day. My best friend Glenn was there, and he saw a plane and ran out from under the debris because he was working at Goldman Sachs at the time as IT security. So he got out of the city by running to the George Washington Bridge all the way uptown and catching a bus before things were shut down. Anyway, I watched, what was curious to me, the second building that got hit come down first. That was the first thing that I noticed that was kind of weird. So that's odd, both buildings were hit at similar attitudes, or altitudes, and it was the second building to be hit that went down first, and it went down completely in its own footprint. Now, I'm a builder, and I have a fascination with pyrotechnics. I gotta love rock and roll. It educates you in so many things like technology and things like pyrotechnics. And I studied a little bit about explosives and demolition. And one of the things, you know, from reading trade magazines and such, I learned over the years is that there are only 6 or 8, or maybe even at most a dozen corporations in the world that are capable and qualified to demolish, under controlled demolition, superstructures. Because it is a very precise, I'm going to call it an art form. These guys who go into these buildings have to study the buildings meticulously and place explosive charges precisely at critical points. And then when it comes to actually detonating these things, the detonation has to happen in a timed sequence perfectly. There's very, very little room for error, and then the structure comes down neatly into its own footprint. Not to mention a lot of the anomalies around the 9/11 event, but having, you know, this knowledge in my head and watching it on TV, it took me less than 30 seconds to say to my then partner, well, that was controlled demolition from day one. Watching it actually happen on screen, live TV, watching it come down in its own footprint, I immediately was unconvinced that jet fuel and an impact from a jetliner could take down a superstructure like that. Just little old me, carpenter, masonry dude, in a driveway, came to that conclusion in less than 30 seconds. And then the other one comes down. Same thing, within its own footprint. Perfectly. So now we have a reaction from our populace, and that's not even getting into the Pennsylvania, the plane that went down in Pennsylvania, or the Pentagon. I mean, those are a whole nother aspects to this. The reaction for myself personally is I could taste the concrete and the burning flesh from 100 miles away in Connecticut. I could taste it because I could feel it in the media, in the reporters, in the first responders. You know, everybody telling their stories. You know, for those days and weeks, for the 3 months, underneath that pile of rubble was burning plasma. Metal from the beams had pooled into this huge pool of molten steel that was burning the boots of the first responders who were going through looking for the remains of people. And then, you know, life goes on, and then you meet people in life. And I met a fella who happened to be a Mohawk from Akwesasne, older guy, and he was compelled to go down there and search through the rubble because he had actually worked on the construction of that building. And he was so moved. So he was down there with the first responders, along with a lot of other steel workers, many of them native. And he just shook his head while we were having coffee at the Millbrook Diner, because we happened to meet, and we just started talking about it. And he needed to talk. And what he told me was, there wasn't a fragment of anything bigger than, say, a quarter. You know, like a $quarter bill, like a quarter. That big. Everything. Glass, concrete, furniture, everything was pulverized to dust. And you had this gray dust that went everywhere. It was just inches and inches of dust on the streets for many, many, many blocks. The debris field, though it was contained, that pile of rubble, most of that rubble was dust. Pulverized, concrete, steel reinforced concrete. And he just shook his head and said, he doesn't know what kind of power could do that. This is a guy that actually worked on building the World Trade Center, picking through the rubble, telling me that nothing was, not, you had shards of glass that were about the size of a quarter, and any other material. Nothing survived this thing. It was all just pulverized. And what did that do? It traumatized not just New York City, it traumatized our whole nation. And for those of us who really paid attention to the event, and how could you not, I think we're a nation with post-traumatic stress. We're a nation. We haven't dealt with this in a meaningful way. So that's what led to this vast plan, or agenda, program, if you will, to move into other countries, Afghanistan, Iraq, and now, Syria, all these Middle Eastern countries, Libya. Now, Libya is a very strange case. Why we took out Gaddafi, who may be a strong man, but he was pretty moderate. Turned out that he didn't want to sell oil or buy oil or sell oil or whatever it was with the US dollar. And it turns out that a lot of these countries in the Middle East, like Iraq, were changing to a different international trade scheme that didn't include the US dollar. I don't know, I'm not an economics expert. I just find it interesting that we have all these wars in the Middle East, and that the people that suffer the most are the indigenous populations of these countries. And invariably, it's extraction of some kind of raw material that benefit our civilization, our world civilization, but primarily, I'm not even going to say U.S. corporations, because they're not U.S. corporations anymore. They're transnational corporations. And this has been going on a long time. So the cell phones that we use, the batteries that are going into those electronic devices, cell phone, all of them, computers, electric cars, lithium. And lithium, huge multi-trillion-dollar vein of lithium has been found in Afghanistan. So in a way, we're kind of looking at gunboat diplomacy, to get the resources that the makers of these products want. And I'm winding down now. I've kind of gone over a lot of different things here that affect our community. The judicial machinery, the impact of cultural manipulation. Really study that concept, problem, reaction, solution, and how it's been used historically and how it's being used now to get compliance from us. And that's where, I kind of want to go back to Thomas Jefferson, who said that, I believe it was Thomas Jefferson, that the best insurance policy against tyranny is a well-armed population. And to add to that, you know, if you study history just a little bit and you look at what Stalin did, or Stalin and his gang, because, you know, it's not just one person that makes these decisions happen. It is many people. There's a whole, it always has to be an organized agenda. The Nazi Party in Germany, you know, they have all disarmed their population before implementing the draconian policies that led us to various wars or tragedies, holocausts. There's been more than one Holocaust out there. You know, the Romanians in World War I took a terrible, terrible hit. Millions of people murdered to break the Ottoman Empire. And then, you know, my passion and part of my lineage, Native Americans here, bears a really, you know, astonishing statistic, and I like to tell this statistic from time to time, and it can be found in the March 1983 National Geographic. There's a lot of great articles in that about how the United States Constitution was designed after many, many educational meetings with the Haudenosaunee Grand Council. That's the Five Nation Confederacy that's located in the New York State region prior to the writing of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. You know, a lot of our, you know, Hamilton and Jefferson and their company of sorts were educated as to how to have a government function in an egalitarian way. So the Native American community, you know, the indigenous people of North America for 5 centuries, particularly the first 3 centuries, suffered horribly a Holocaust of 300 million people who were murdered either directly from war, after effects of war, or contact with communicable diseases, most famously the tuberculosis-laden blankets. So germ warfare was used on these people who had no immunity to any of the common diseases in Europe at the time. So we're talking 100 million death per century. Now I worked these numbers out. For 3 centuries, those first 3 centuries of contact, 300 million was estimated murdered. So that's 100 million per century. That's 10 million per decade. 10 million in a decade. For 3 centuries, folks. That makes what happened in World War II look pretty tame. I mean, you know, there's approximately 600 indigenous nations in North America today. That's what's left from the genocide that's gone on. So, you know, we have a lot to consider in our future here, because this is what's built, what brought us to today. Includes a lot of horror stories, and it includes a lot of heroic stories and good things. And what are we going to do about it? Well, I say get involved with your local town. Get, you know, the probably the biggest threat to our collective health is this thing called the 5G rollout. The more I study microwave energy, I was studying some of this stuff last night, and this microwave energy at these higher and higher frequencies that they want to tap into to put our communications and our technology on, will be an infrastructure like nothing you've ever seen. If you think there's too many cell towers now, it's going to be way more cell towers. And the impact of microwave energy in our homes, in our communities, you won't even be able to be free by going out into nature. They want everything under this microwave umbrella or web. Impacts your reproductive organs, and the impact of this stuff, what I was reading about, was on embryonic or pre-embryonic structures, of our fertilized eggs in our human bodies are going to be subjected to a 20% or more increase in microwave energies, and some of these frequencies are at a different, up until now, illegal range that really is going to create an incredibly horrible impact on these very, very delicate forming fetuses and such. So I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in and listening to me. And thought we had a call there, but I guess it was a hanger-upper. And thanks for tuning in to Woodstock Access TV. And thanks, Paul Gloria, for teching for me. And we've just killed another hour with Conant SHow.